Okay, gentlemen, I just detected a little bit of operator error there, and I realized I was running through the presentation without my mic turned on. So operator error, I apologize. We're only a couple slides into it, so I'm going to back it up and start over. Well, welcome to the FAA Wings Program Webinar, Airmanship 2.0 versus Airmanship 1.0. I'm Dave Cook. I'm the Executive Director of the Center for Airmanship Excellence. Give you a quick briefing on your control panel. You have a white arrow in an orange box that collapses or expands your control panel. You have the mute opportunity there on your mic, and I'd like to ask that you mute your mic unless you want to say something. Best way to do this is with microphone and speakers, but if you don't want to do that, you can use your telephone. Now, as I'm sure you've already noticed, this is a PowerPoint presentation. Now, I know about 53% of you just love these PowerPoint presentations, but about 53% of you hate them. So to the latter, I apologize, and to the former, you're welcome. But just because it's PowerPoint doesn't mean you can go to sleep. You've got to pay attention, because you do get 1 Wings Program knowledge credit for attending this webinar. Webinar sponsors are the FAA Safety Team and the Center for Airmanship Excellence. Now, what I thought we'd try, if we don't have any further audio problems here, is just to share a little bit among the group that's with us this evening, so we can kind of get a feel for what kind of flying we're doing now. What we're doing. So, Pat, I see you're on here this evening. Can you hear me, Pat? Stand by just one. There, Pat, are you there? I can hear some background noise, but not quite. How about Bill Brand? Bill, are you in the loop?
Yes, I'm here, but you're a little weak on the audio.
All right, well, that's probably just me this afternoon. Welcome, Bill. At least I know I've got one loop. How about Mark? Mark Epner, can you transmit?
Yeah, I hope so. Can you hear me?
Oh, I sure can, Mark. Okay, great, great. Well, let's start with you, Mark, since we've got you, and since you and I talked a little bit briefly earlier today. Just share with us a little bit, what kind of flying you're doing now, what kind of airplanes you're flying, how much you're flying, and why you're here at the webinar this evening.
All right, terrific. Well, most of my flying is personal, although I try to mix in a little business. I'm part owner in an SR-22, president of a flying club with 3, a Diamond, an Archer, and a Cirrus SR-20 over at Milwaukee in Chicagoland. I try to fly every week, so somewhere between 100 to 120 hours a year. And, it's all about safety. I just love to learn about this stuff. I got my license in the 70s, took 25 years off, and picked it up again in 2004, picked up an instrument rating, and it's what I dream about all day, every day. So that's what brings me here, to learn some more.
That's great, Mark, and that's the kind of guys we hope will show up for these webinars, because that's what this is all about, is digging a little bit deeper into what that airmanship stuff is all about. How about Pat? You want to try it again, Pat Delicruz? Can you transmit, Pat?
Hello, can you hear me?
Gotcha.
Most of my flying is done as a flight instructor. I fly several different kinds of airplanes that my students own. I fly maybe 30 hours a year just for pleasure.
Okay, thanks. And how about Robert? Is it Pazizik? Robert, can you transmit? All right. How about Kurt? I'm sorry, I apologize for these audio problems, guys. We've had this problem last time on GoToMeeting, and I thought I did a little research and thought I had done the right things, and I don't know if it's on the other end or this end or in the system, but I guess we can't hear from these guys right now. All right, I've muted everybody's mic just so that there are no open mics getting feedback and that sort of thing. I'll open back up here in a minute. So thank you for sharing that with us, and glad to see that you guys are interested in looking into this Airmanship 2.0. Well, here's a quick overview of the webinar series. The first webinar, which was we held last week, we talked about who's behind all this Airmanship 2.0. We talked about the Center for Airmanship Excellence, the Board of Advisors, the committee chairs, more than 20 volunteers now that are working on this. So we kind of said, okay, here's who we are, because what we're saying we know is, you might think it's a little bit radical, a little bit out there. So we want you to know who's telling you all this. So we went into that in pretty good detail last time. And of course, in this webinar, we're going to talk about Airmanship 2.0 versus Airmanship 1.0. And in the next webinar, we're going to look at your personal Airmanship 2.0 development plan. And in the fourth one, we'll look at Airmanship 2.0, what aircraft to fly and how to learn to fly them. And in the fifth and final webinar in this series, we'll talk about why you need Airmanship 2.0 and how you can go get it. Now, I have to preface all of this with telling you we only have time to take a look at the tip of the iceberg in this webinar. There's much more to this. And the best way right now for you to find out all about Airmanship 2.0 is to go to the website for the Center for Airmanship Excellence. That's just airmanshipexcellence.org. And you'll see a navigation button there that says Airmanship 2.0. Just click on that button. And that'll take you to this landing page. Sorry, this is a screenshot, so it's not real clear, but I didn't expect you to read it. But this is the landing page you'll go to. And you'll see that we explore this whole subject in pretty good detail. We have information on who we are in much more detail than we talked about in the last webinar in this series. We have an in-depth discussion of Airmanship 1.0. Tonight we're going to have more or less an overview look at Airmanship 1.0. Ditto Airmanship 2.0. We have a quick look at the current airmanship model, and if you get into this, you'll find that we use the current airmanship model as a framework for setting up our airmanship development. And then a closer explanation, a look at your personal airmanship development plan. Everybody who participates in Airmanship 2.0 needs to have an airmanship development plan, so that's all explained in briefings in that section. Then we take a look at technically advanced aircraft, but how we think they should be equipped and used and how you should train to use them. Then we look at learning to fly the Airmanship 2.0 way. Now, that's primarily information aimed at folks who are looking at learning to fly. They haven't started yet, or maybe they started and dropped out. And it presents our viewpoint on how you should go about learning to fly in today's environment if you want to be an excellent airman. But it also includes some information for those who have already learned to fly at whatever level on maybe some things they ought to consider on filling in some gaps and other things they can do in their personal training plans. Then we talk about Airmanship 2.0 support, because Airmanship 2.0 can't be practiced in a vacuum. It's a shared experience. You've got to be in an organization, we believe, to do this, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. But so this briefing talks all about what kind of support and how you get it. And then we have a detailed briefing on why you need Airmanship 2.0. Again, we're going to touch on that in the fifth webinar in this series, but not in as much detail as you'll find here in the briefings at the website. And then we get into a very detailed briefing on the ADSOT. We affectionately call it the ADSOT. I mean, after all, this is aviation. We have to have acronyms. So we made this one up, and it stands for Airmanship Development Support Organization Demonstrator, ADSOT. And the EDSOD is an organization, a flight organization. We're in the process of standing up here in the Chicago area, where those of us who want to pursue Airmanship Excellence through the practice of Airmanship 2.0 can come together and have that shared experience and be able to get the equipment and all of the support we need to do it right. And then we have a briefing on flying partners. We all have folks that fly with us who are not pilots. We believe that those folks in our lives really need to be educated better, especially for the folks who are looking at learning to fly. We all know about that problem if we're already pilots. And then there's a button you can click on to apply to be a Center for Airmanship Excellence volunteer if you decide you want to join us in spreading the word about Airmanship 2.0 and showing the aviation industry and personal flyers all around the country that this can work and produce the benefits we're going to show you here in just a few minutes. So you can apply to be a volunteer. You can apply to join us in the ADSOD, become a pilot participant in the ADSOD, or you can apply to be a staff member because we're going to have we've got about half of the staff people that we think we're going to need right now in the beginning, but we're looking for more. And of course, at any time you need more info going through that series of briefings in the Airmanship 2.0 subweb, you can click on that button and it will give you all the ways you can get in touch with us. Want somebody to call you, we'll call you and talk about this. So at this point, do we have any questions or comments? I'm going to unmute all the mics right now. So if you want to have a comment or ask a question, go ahead and speak up, and I'll try to call any ties. Okay, good. We will move on. I'm going to mute all the mics again. All right, let's take a closer look at Airmanship 1.0. Notice I have an asterisk up there, and the asterisk is as defined by the Center for Airmanship Excellence. So the FAA doesn't have a definition of Airmanship 1.0. Airmanship 1.0 isn't defined in the Airman's Information Manual, Aeronautical Information Manual. Boy, that dates me. It's not defined anywhere in the industry. This is a label that we put on it to give us a handle on what I'm going to show you we believe Airmanship 1.0 is, so that it's easier to talk about Airmanship 2.0. Now, Airmanship 1.0, we believe, really goes back into the mythology of airmanship. And you probably recall the story, the mythological story, Greek myth, 2,500 years or so ago, of Icarus and Daedalus. And if you haven't heard it, then I will give a quick briefing on it. And those of you who have heard it before, you can check me and see if I got this, if my memory serves. But as the story goes, Icarus, the son, and Daedalus, the father, were imprisoned on a Greek island. I forget what their infraction was. And they decided they were going to escape by fashioning wings made out of wax and feathers strapped to their arms. And they just fly away. Well, they did, and they did. They got out of the island. They were flying along, doing good, heading for the mainland. And Icarus the son, started enjoying it so much, started feeling his oats, started feeling very confident with his new wings, and he started flying higher and higher and closer to the sun. Daedalus, the seasoned airman, the old mentor, the guy that knew a lot more about flying than Icarus, said, "Icarus, come down. Don't fly so close to the sun. If you do, your wings will come off." Well, Icarus said, "Don't worry about it, Dad. I got this all under control." And he kept climbing. And sure enough, he got close enough to the sun that the wax melted, the feathers came off, and Icarus took that final plunge and was probably the first guy to buy the farm. So if you think about it, that has a lot of things to say about airmanship. Knowledge of yourself, knowledge of your flying machine, knowledge of your limitations, the team you're working with, the limitations of the team, the environment you're operating in. All of those things come into what we call airmanship. And so I think we can place the origins of airmanship right back there in the origin myth, if you will, of airmanship. But really, airmanship as we know it today, I believe, started coming together with the Wright brothers. One thing they did is they documented pretty much everything they did in developing the airplane. Autobiographies, they let a lot of other biographies be written about them. They took a lot of notes, as we all know. And so they did that along with, how to build an airplane. They did that with how to fly an airplane. And so they brought knowledge of aircraft, knowledge of each other because they worked together well as a team, knowledge of the environment they were trying to fly in, and knowledge of themselves. And they started systematizing that and writing it down. So I think, that's really the origin of modern Airmanship 1.0, if you will. Then the early pioneers added to airmanship by bringing in planning, discipline, and risk assessment. And of course, that was just self-preservation driving them. The accident rate was horrendous back then, and so they had to do something to stay alive. So they started bringing in planning, discipline, and risk assessment. And then by World War I, expert airmen, real aviators, were looked upon as skilled and proficient, knowledgeable about their aircraft, themselves, their teammates, their environment, and the risks they face. And then by the end of World War II, we pretty much had what we call Airmanship 1.0 figured out. We believed at that point that discipline, skill, proficiency, and knowledge yield situational awareness and good judgment. And that's really where we're at right now today with Airmanship 1.0 is talking about that situational awareness and good judgment. That's what we need all the time. Well, that really came together by the end of World War II. Then after World War II, in terms of airmanship, airline pilots, personal flyers like us, and military aviators were pretty much flying down the same track in formation, the Airmanship 1.0 track, right up into the early 1980s. And during that time, from World War II to the early 80s, about 35, 40 years there, the environment in which we practiced airmanship changed rapidly. But the practice of airmanship changed relatively slowly from the end of World War II to the early 80s. However, the real good news is that our human factors knowledge base expanded rapidly during that period. Now, in the early 1980s, up until now, I should say from the early 1980s up until now, personal flyers, those of us who are flying airplanes for our own personal transportation and recreation, folks like us, have been flying right on down that Airmanship 1.0 track. It hasn't changed a whole lot since the early 1980s how we approach it. I didn't say there isn't a lot more information out now. There aren't a lot more tools out now than there were in the early 1980s, because there certainly are. But the way that we practice airmanship is pretty much the same way that we practiced it in the early 1980s in the personal flying game. However, in the early 1980s, the airline pilots and the military aviators peeled off and they started down a different track. And that's the track we call Airmanship 2.0. And now, airline and military pilots enjoy continuous, formal airmanship development supported by a safety culture and safety management system. So we can talk a lot more about that, but that's when we believe the split between Airmanship 1.0 and Airmanship 2.0 happened was in the early 1980s. And I was there on the conference this evening is another CFAE volunteer committee chairman, Bill Brand, who's also a retired United Airlines pilot. He was in the airline industry in the early 1980s also. All of us that were around then, we can see where this divergence of tracks took place. And it wasn't any one date, but it was in that early 1980s. Now let's drill a little deeper into what we think Airmanship 1.0 is, how we define it. So now in personal flying, we have pilot error accounts for over 80% of all of our accidents. We're making mistakes that are hurting us, killing us, bending airplanes, and we don't like to make mistakes. We're pilots, we're trained not to make mistakes. Our personality types are the types that don't want to make mistakes. But 80% of the accidents are caused by us. So this is the new frontier. This is probably the final frontier in airmanship is digging down into ourselves, going into that zen of airmanship now, and going after these errors we've been making. Also, the general aviation accident rate is 34 times worse than the airlines, so the proof is in the pudding, we think. Personal flying has stayed on the Airmanship 1.0 track, and the airlines went off on the Airmanship 2.0 track, and they reduced their safety record down to 0.15 accidents per 100,000 hours of flying time. We believe that we can get down there too. The GA accident rate has been virtually unchanged for 30 years. So all of the things that the FAA, the AOPA, the safety team, all of us have been talking about among ourselves, the whole industry. We've all been doing a great job over the last 30 years of talking about how to avoid accidents, how to become better pilots, how to get that accident record in personal flying down there by where the airlines are. Because if you think about it, we should be able to do better than the airlines because there aren't any times where we really have to go. We don't need to launch into that, very challenging weather. So, but with all that talking for over 30 years now, the general aviation accident rate has virtually, it's been virtually unchanged. Moved up and down just a little bit, ticks up, ticks down, ticks up, about the same. So, that's not working. GA pilots are dropping out at an alarming rate. We had 850,000 active pilots in the peak back in the early 80s, and now in the U.S., and now we're down to around 600,000. I've seen numbers that are a little above, a little below, but around 600,000. And that's the definition of active pilot is the FAA's definition, which just means current medical. Doesn't mean really flying much. And GA pilots are flying less. In the early 1980s, we were flying about 35 million piston hours a year. Now we're flying about 14 million piston hours a year. So we're all flying a lot less. Average hours are down from about 50 a year per pilot in the U.S. down to around 20 per year. New pilots are not joining us. We had over 136,000 student starts a year on average through the late 70s and early 80s. Now we're down around 50,000 a year. And even more alarmingly, about 80% of those people that do start never get a certificate, so they're not joining us. And the GA infrastructure is shrinking rapidly. The number of flight schools are going down. The number of rental operations are going down. The number of FBOs are going down. There were 12,000 FBOs in the U.S. in the early 1980s. Now there's less than 4,000. So we think in every one of those cases there, every one of those indicators of the health of the personal flying segment of the general aviation industry, we believe that Airmanship 1.0 is either wholly at fault for it or at least partially at fault for causing that, the practice of Airmanship 1.0. I know that's a big statement, but we explain it all. I won't be able to explain it all probably the detail you want in this webinar, but the explanation in detail is available at airmanshipexcellence.org. Now, again, still drilling down into what Airmanship 1.0 is in our definition. It's flying less than modern aircraft for personal transportation. Now, it's fun to fly antique airplanes. I like to fly antique airplanes. Brings back the good old days for me, as long as I do that in a very controlled situation. If you use an airplane for personal transportation, that's not really a controlled situation in terms of what you need out of the airplane, what kind of performance you need, what kind of safety features are on it. All of that sort of thing comes into play if you use an airplane for personal transportation. And so we believe that flying less than modern airplanes is not really the way to go. So we're saying that's the Airmanship 1.0 way to go, which is the way it's being done primarily by personal flyers. We all know the average age of the fleet is about 30-some years. So, we're flying old airplanes for personal transportation, but that's Airmanship 1.0. Also, using minimum government standards for airmanship qualification is Airmanship 1.0. Now, we have no argument with doing this because that's the way it's been done. We grew up in this system. All we're saying is this is the Airmanship 1.0 way of doing it, And Airmanship 2.0 is different, and I'll show you what that is in just a bit. So it's not just going out there and meeting the practical test standards. For example, private pilot, get through your check ride, and now that's it. It's not just using those minimum standards to get qualified to do what you want to do with an airplane. And also, Airmanship 1.0 is letting those qualifications deteriorate over time. I've been instructing for a long time. I've been working on recurrent training with people flying their own high-performance singles and twins for a few years now in simulators. And I see firsthand, and I know by talking to people, and I know by looking at the accident rate, that we're all letting our qualifications deteriorate. Also, I know from empirical evidence what it takes to keep those our qualifications from deteriorating. You can't just go out and fly every now and then and maintain your qualifications, your ability in all areas to do what you want to do with that airplane. So, our skills deteriorate very rapidly. But that's Airmanship 1.0. So again, we're not saying you're a bad guy if that's the way you're doing it, because that's the way most of us are doing it now. We're just saying that's the old way. That's the Airmanship 1.0 way of doing it, just to give us a contrast here when we go into Airmanship 2.0. Airmanship 1.0 is insufficient initial, recurrent, and upgrade training. Airmanship 1.0 is calling a flight review recurrent training. Recurrent training has to happen much more often than once every 2 years. And also Airmanship 1.0 is flying when not fully qualified to fly that particular flight. And qualified, there's a long list of things on that checklist to tell you whether or not you're qualified to fly any particular flight. But too much of that is done in Airmanship 1.0, in our opinion. Now, Airmanship 1.0 is also not using risk assessment tools. I've been giving these seminars, the airmanship seminars, for over a year now, and I'll generally ask how many people are using a risk assessment tool, formal risk assessment tool, like the one on, here's the AOPA online flight risk evaluator, but there are others. And I'll generally get, less than 1% of the group regularly uses a flight risk evaluator. So that's Airmanship 1.0. We're not using flight risk evaluators in general right now. So again, that's part of the definition of Airmanship 1.0. Also, Airmanship 1.0 is making critical decisions all by yourself. As you'll see, this is done differently in Airmanship 2.0, but if you think about it, those 80% of the errors we make, a lot of the fatal crashes, especially when we trace back in that error chain and look at those links, usually the first or second or maybe the third link is making that go, no-go decision in the first place. So, and if you're making that go, no-go decision all by yourself, I don't care what your experience level is. The accident record shows it makes no difference what your experience level is. You can make a bad decision. So Airmanship 1.0 is where we're tossed out here into that world, and we've got to do that all by ourselves. But we know, those of us who have operated under Airmanship 2.0, we know that's not the way to do it. And we'll show you that in Airmanship 2.0. Airmanship 1.0 is also not learning and using formal aeronautical decision-making skills and techniques. Learning and using. Now, this information on ADM has been around for quite a while. The FAA does a great job on putting this stuff out. There are other folks who have done great jobs of explaining it and other ways to approach it. Doesn't make a whole lot of difference how you do it. You don't have to do it the FAA way, but you do have to have a way to make your decisions. And those are skills and techniques combined. And so you have to learn them and use them faithfully all the time. So, but we've noticed in Airmanship 1.0 flying, that's not being done. So most of the guys that are flying under Airmanship 1.0 are not using these skills and techniques, and that's the way Airmanship 1.0 has been done. So again, definition. Also, Airmanship 1.0 is flying aircraft without all of the modern safety devices, kind of like, expressway driving 1.0, where you drove down the Kennedy and a 57 Edsel with no seat belts, or 2011 Kennedy Expressway, where you're going down in your SUV with, airbags, side impact bags, warning devices, everything else. So Airmanship 1.0 is flying without these devices. And again, our definition, Airmanship 1.0, is not fully participating in a formal aviation safety culture, formal culture. We'll look at what that is in just a bit. And not flying with a professional safety management system. We'll look at that in just a bit. So in short, in our opinion, Airmanship 1.0 is simply not flying right. If that's how you're flying, you're not doing it right. That's our opinion based on our analysis of the situation, based on our analysis of how to turn things around in general aviation, how to make flying much more fun for all of us, less expensive for us, much, much safer for all of us that fly personal airplanes. So, are there any questions or comments on that? I'm going to unmute all the mics and feel free to express your opinion. If you think I'm all wet with this kind of thinking, go right ahead and say it.
Dave, Mark Epner, I got a question.
Go ahead, Mark.
Yeah, you mentioned that comparing 1.0 versus 2.0 since the 80s and that the airlines and the general aviation pilot diverged. It occurs to me that I would think that the airlines, even in the 1.0, had a much lower accident rate because they flew a lot and because they had 2 pilots in the plane. So you said the general aviation accident rate hasn't changed, but has the airlines changed, or they've always just been better? And is it nothing to do with 1 versus 2?
Oh, that's a great question, and I'm going to mute the mic so I'm getting some feedback. Stand by. There we go. It's a great question. The answer would probably have to get a little complicated because there's not quite an apples comparison there. And that argument is thrown up a lot, I know it has been over the years, about, well, yeah, airline pilots can do it that way, but we can't do it that way over here in our personal flying because. So let me address that first. We've looked at all of those elements that the airline guys, military guys are doing to make it as safe as they have. And we can adapt each one of those techniques, skills, engineered solution, on and on, all of the things you need to be that much safer. We can adapt them for our use in personal flying, and we can do it at a reasonable cost, and we can do it without making people feel like they're, just driving a bus down the road. So but you have to answer that really well, we'd have to go into each one of those elements and start comparing them. Now, in terms of the safety record at the airlines and the general aviation safety record, it's the airline safety record if you go back to before the early 1980s, like into the 60s, let's say, when early 60s and jets were coming in, compared to the current safety record, it was much higher. I don't have the numbers in my head to give you like a percentage, but I've looked at the numbers. I just don't recall them. But it was much higher as a percentage of where they are now. So yes, those techniques, especially since the early 80s, has made it much safer. And I think one of the problems with trying to see how much safer it has made it, those techniques have made it, is that the stress on the system, the pilots flying the system, has increased exponentially from the early 1980s to now, and it's still gotten safer. Now, it's been about the same for the last 15 years, maybe 20 years. The airline accident rate stayed pretty close to the same value, but it's been 0.15 per 100,000 hours. So I hope that it kind of answers it. Again, there's more to it. I'm going to unmute and see if that worked for you, Mark. Did that answer the question for you?
Yeah, fine. Again, I guess opinions and assumptions, but it's an interesting topic, so thank you.
Yes, and again, it's in all those it's in all those details that you really see it. So you have to compare, what the specific elements of all this, of Airmanship 2.0, that were done at the airlines, and what would happen if you did that over here in personal flying, and can you do it? So again, that's the answer. So I'm going to open up the mics one more time. Anybody else have any questions or comments? Okay. We will move on. So let's take a look at Airmanship 2.0 now. And again, I hope you didn't think I was throwing rocks at Airmanship 1.0, because that's the way we have been flying. Again, we wanted to use that primarily as the, well, here's the way we've been doing it. Let's look at that so we're all on the same sheet. And now here's the different way we're talking about. And again, this is how we define Airmanship 2.0. There's nothing in the manuals about what Airmanship 2.0 is. And I want to put this in context. We're just talking about personal flying. We're not talking about professional flying here, just using airplanes for our own personal transportation and pleasure. So basically, a quick way to look at Airmanship 2.0 is to look at it from this point. It asks the question, if I don't fly right, should I fly at all? And then it answers the question, if you're going to fly right, do it right. And we took that quote right out of the book, Redefining Airmanship by Colonel Tony Kern, which is, we can look on it kind of as the Bible of airmanship. And he quotes Yeager as saying just this, if you're going to fly, do it right. And I've read a little bit more about Yeager saying this, and it turns out he said this back when he was a young guy in his 20s, as a military test pilot. It wasn't something he said after he got to be an old man. And I guess it served, this motto served him well over all those years of that kind of flying. Another way to look at what Airmanship 2.0 is, it's doing it right. So as we frame this for you, we give you this definition of Airmanship 2.0. Keep in mind, this is what we believe we all should be doing to do it right. This is what doing it right means, Airmanship 2.0. And Airmanship 2.0 is a new paradigm in personal flying, so it's something new for us. But it's based on tried and true airmanship principles that have proven to be effective with the airlines and the military. But we've modified them for our use. And we've modified them for our use in today's flight environment. So if you're going to use an airplane to go someplace, this is the way you should operate the airplane, Airmanship 2.0. And at a reasonable cost, because that's a major problem we have to fix in personal flying. The costs are spiraling up. And as we have fewer and fewer people using the aviation services that make up our personal flying world, those costs can only go one way, unless there's some kind of a miracle that comes by, and I'm not counting on that. So we believe that Airmanship 2.0 will lead to reasonable cost. And we'll talk about that, or we do talk about that in detail in the briefings on the website. Airmanship 2.0 is a new way for you to enjoy flying. We all got into this at least partially for the fun of flying. We all love flying. We look up when airplanes fly over. If we get a chance to get in, we go fly it. We love it. But you need to always, we believe, look for ways to enjoy it more. Now, I don't mean Yahoo, look at this, dive straight down to the wings bend kind of fun. I mean just pure enjoyment, and you know what I mean. That we can get the kind we can get out of flying. Well, Airmanship 2.0 enhances that. And Airmanship 2.0 is a new approach to maximizing all of those personal rewards you get from flying. And you know what they are. And I have been talking to a lot of pilots now that have been personal flyers for a long time, and they're telling me those personal rewards have been getting a little rusty for them. They're kind of waning, not getting as much out of it as they used to. I hear a lot. Well, Airmanship 2.0 is a way to turn that around. Airmanship 2.0 increases the value you get for your flying dollar. So the way this is structured, not only do we believe that it will reduce costs overall, but it also vastly increases the value we get for every dollar. It costs a lot to go fly airplanes. No bucks, no Buck Rogers. We all know that. It always has, always will, but it's our addiction. If we're going to go do it, we've got to spend the money. Only way to avoid it is to go through all the expense and time and effort of getting your professional credentials and go out and get paid for flying airplanes. But there's a couple downsides to that one too. So if we're spending money to go flying, I think we all should be very interested in getting a lot more value out of whatever dollar we do end up spending. And Airmanship 2.0 does that. Airmanship 2.0 continuously enhances your airmanship skills. So not just every now and then do you go upgrade your skills. You're continuously enhancing your skills for two reasons. First of all, you have to continuously work on those skills just to maintain the level you have achieved, because it starts fading right away and quickly. But if you're going to become a better and better airman, if you're going to pursue airmanship excellence, you have to continuously hone those skills. Also, Airmanship 2.0 is a system that continuously enhances your aeronautical knowledge, your airmanship knowledge, and it continuously enhances your capabilities, what you can do with an airplane. Airmanship 2.0 is a surefire way for you to become a safer, more proficient aviator. Airmanship 2.0 includes flying in what we call, another acronym, ADSO, Airmanship Development Support Organization, and that's a flight operation. It can be a flying club, it could be a flight school, it could be a rental operation, it could be a partnership, a shared airplane partnership, it could be an airline operation, a military flight operation, civil air patrol operation, as long as that operation is providing the right kind of support, airmanship development support, to those pilots who are flying within it, who are pursuing airmanship excellence, then that's what we define as an ADSO. And then we'll talk about what some of those things are here in just a minute. Also, Airmanship 2.0 includes belonging in the true sense of the word, to a high-performing safety culture. And a high-performing safety culture, in our opinion, has safety leadership, performance management, safety coaching, and behavioral safety as a goal, and as a training and systems to support that. It has to be formal. And also, Airmanship 2.0 means using consistently a safety management system that has a safety policy, safety risk management, safety assurance, and safety promotion. Airmanship 2.0 includes your formal airmanship training. It has to be at the highest level. The training has to be airline level, corporate pilot level, military level training, designed by people who know what they're doing, and focused on not just achieving practical test standards or a certain level of knowledge for a certificate, but focused on doing that and making you a better airman in every sense of the word continuously. Along with that periodic formal training, you continuously have informal airmanship training, and that's structured. That's so every time you go flying, you are training yourself to become a better airman. And that really is done through the use of your personal airmanship development plan. Airmanship 2.0 includes comprehensive airmanship training that uses all the available media that we have today. That makes it so much easier to learn anything but things about aviation. We all learn in different ways, so we can mix and match, but Airmanship 2.0 needs really good, robust, comprehensive airmanship knowledge training provided to us in the kind of media that we can use. But it does still include traditional classroom training, because that's a great place to share experiences, to meet other people who are going through the same experiences you're going through, and to meet the other instructors and other folks in the organization. Also, one-on-one is always included in flight training, but in airmanship training, it's a little more structured and a lot more focused on airmanship development. And that comprehensive airmanship training includes mentor pilots, senior instructors, and associate instructors working with you as your airmanship development team, your training team. So in Airmanship 2.0, you don't just have maybe a favorite flight instructor that works with you, or maybe a flight school that you go to talk to the manager when you want to get some training. You have folks that are involved with you continuously, and they know what your airmanship development plan is, and they are working to support you to work through that airmanship development plan, become a better aviator. A comprehensive airmanship training also includes using the latest type of flight training devices that can make flight training much more effective and vastly increase your flight training dollar. Here's a good example of what I'm talking about. This is the Aperio Vision 1000 system. This unit is about the size of the palm of your hand. It is mounted in the overhead of a cockpit. It has video recording capability, flight data recorder, accelerometer. airspeed, altitude, heading, pitch bank, all of that stuff is recorded on an SD card. When you land, you upload that information to a server, and then you can access that server from any online PC, and you can analyze your flight. You can go over your flight training episode event as many times as you want. You can slice it and dice it. You can look at it in many different ways. It vastly increases the effectiveness of your training. Now, Airmanship 2.0 also includes the type of aircraft that you fly. Again, modern aircraft like the Cirrus line, all the modern safety devices in it, the LSAs like the flight design, CTLS. However, we kind of vary on this principle a little bit, in that we believe we need to mix into the type of airplanes we fly tail draggers. If you look at the current accident statistics, takeoff and landing accidents, loss of control are by far the largest accident category in personal flying. And we've been around a long time. We've flown a lot of different kind of airplanes, including these kinds of airplanes, and most of us that are behind this learn to fly in these kind of airplanes. And all of us agree that if you get real good tail dragger training in the beginning of your flying career, and if you miss that, you get it as soon as you can, a good tail dragger transition course, so that you're really proficient, takeoff and landings in the tail dragger, and then you get periodic recurrent training and takeoff and landings in a tail dragger, that you are much safer in takeoff and landing situations. We think we could, if we get everybody doing this, we could really reduce the accident rate just in that one area. Also, Airmanship 2.0 includes the way you fly these airplanes. You fly them for personal transportation, for the challenge of flying, and for fun. And so the Airmanship 2.0 takes all of those different things into account in how it approaches and what it gives you. Airmanship 2.0 in our mind includes how those aircraft are equipped. So again, leading edge stuff like synthetic vision and technology, autoflight systems, enhanced vision systems, a parachute recovery system, satellite tracking systems, sat phones, angle of attack indicators, airbags, head-up displays. They've been used now in the airlines, corporate and military for a long time. Well, now they're available for the kind of airplanes we fly. So we believe that the airplanes you fly, if you're flying under the principles of Airmanship 2.0, pursuing Airmanship Excellence, that you would have aircraft equipped with HUDs. And another big accident category, the biggest fatal accident category, I believe, although don't hold me to that, is the base to final stall spin accident. We believe that if you're properly trained and you have an angle of attack indicator and head-up display and some good operating procedures and rules, that the chance of you getting in that situation are about zero. Now, we're talking about these technically advanced aircraft. We all know there's been a debate as to whether or not they make flying safer, but we believe they definitely do, but only if they have all of the available safety features. Sure, you can put one safety feature on, you're safer, but you're not as safe as you could be if you had all the safety features. So all the available safety features, but you have to have comprehensive initial and recurrent training on how to fly these airplanes and how to best use those safety features. And you have to operate the airplane within a formal safety culture with a safety management system. Now, Airmanship 2.0 also includes operating with a flight operations support team. And I mentioned this earlier about that go, no-go decision, and right now in personal flying, we generally make that decision all by ourselves. Whereas for a long time now at the airlines and the military, every flight has been dispatched, but the pilot command and a licensed certified dispatcher they have to concur on the details of that flight plan, and they have to jointly make the go, no-go decision. If one of them says don't go, the flight can't go. So that we believe has is one of the major factors in the airline safety record. And it's not just that go, no-go decision. It's the other things around it we'll talk about here in a second. But it's not being used at all in personal flying, but it can be, and at a reasonable cost. That flight operations support team will do things like trip planning so that they unload you in the time leading up to the flight. Let's say you're making a long cross-country flight with a few stops, a business trip. They can unload you. That flight operations support team can make all your ground arrangements for you, and that's usually a moving target. They can keep everything up to date for you so that you can think more about your airmanship duties and what kind of airmanship goals you want to pursue on the flight than making hotel reservations. Also, the flight operations support team will do all the flight planning for you. In the 22 years that I flew for United Airlines, I never did a United Airlines flight plan. Dispatch always did the flight plan. Why? Because they had the historical records on all the routes in the aircraft. They had all the performance data and the computers. They had a team if they to support them if they needed more brains in on a particular issue or problem. They had systems. They had the time. So they did the flight planning. Again, unloads you in the time leading up to your flight, but also provides a much better flight plan because it's a team effort. Now, the pilot in command always makes input to the plan and always has final say on the plan. He can reject the plan, and if the dispatcher doesn't agree with the change, then the flight doesn't go. So that has to be set up in the safety culture of the so that you're flying with it. So the support team does all your flight planning under Airmanship 2.0. And then that dispatch function where, two heads are definitely better than one, making that go, no-go decision. Flight tracking, that's what that satellite tracking system is for in the kind of airplanes you fly under Airmanship 2.0. We all have been hearing about problems with the ELTs. We believe that satellite tracking is the way to go for that reason, to solve that problem, but also you can get more support if somebody, a licensed dispatcher, is following your flight, and they can provide you then with in-flight support via that sat phone that I mentioned that's installed in the kind of airplane you'd be flying under Airmanship 2.0. Let's say that you're en route and a TFR pops up, or a NOTAM pops up for your destination airport, or the FBO just ran out of fuel at the destination airport. All kinds of things that you could probably work to find out while you're flying the airplane, but again, loads you up. So you're better off having a team supporting you. That makes you safer, easier, and a lot more fun. Also, the operations team can manage your trip for you while you're flying it. Again, most trips there are some kinds of changes, rental car changes, hotel changes, this and that the flight ops team can manage for you, again, to unload you so you can focus on what's important and what's fun. Take the hassles out of it for you. Now, Airmanship 2.0 also includes flying within an organization that puts flight data recorders in all of the aircraft and provides you with personal flight critique tools. We talked about that Aperio system. It's a flight data recorder. It also can dump that data into an alert system, and that's a flight operations quality assurance program, computer-based system that can analyze the flight and provide you and can provide the safety management system with the data it needs to always improve the safety of the operation and the efficiency of the operation. But it, most importantly, in my mind, provides you with our dynamite critique tool. You can, as we talked about under the training, you can access this online, your flight, and go through your flight as many times as you want, but have all those extra tools there to help you do that. Under Airmanship 2.0, you'll find that self-critique after a flight, or better yet, critiquing if you have someone else who flew with you, is crucial. Also, Airmanship 2.0 includes those mentor pilots, but not just as part of your flight training team. They also help you to put together your and help you to maintain your personal airmanship development plan, keep you motivated, help you make the right kind of choices and changes. We all need at least one solid mentor pilot that knows what they're doing. Airmanship 2.0 provides you with structured airmanship challenges that are fun. And again, I don't know why you guys are doing this, but part of why I'm doing it is fun. And now that I'm not flying for a living, it's more, the fun meter has to be higher and higher than it used to be. Airmanship 2.0, those challenges, if you're under Airmanship 2.0 and the safety culture that's created, includes recognition and rewards for improving your airmanship. And these airmanship challenges are bite-sized. They're not like that big jump from what do I do after I get my private? Oh, go get your instrument ready. Well, that's a huge jump. We're talking about airmanship challenges that are bite-sized. They're affordable. You get them done in a reasonable amount of time with a reasonable amount of effort, but they're always improving your airmanship, continuously improving your airmanship. Here's what I'm talking about. Here's an example. It could be something like included in your personal airmanship development plan is you're going to go out and do an air combat course. And we've all heard about these. You go out and you get some ground school and you climb in with a fighter pilot and a Simaki here or a T-34 or something, and you go out and have at it with another one. And of course these aircraft are equipped with a laser and a laser receiver, and you zap the opponent with your laser, hit that receiver on his aircraft, and the smoke comes out and you've won. And so that's got to be great fun. It's got to improve your airmanship skills, but I can't see doing that in that amount of time and getting a whole lot out of it other than the pure thrill of it and the fun of it. But because you have to have a fighter pilot in there with you, a guy that knows what he's doing, and he's on the controls probably more than not, coaching you through all the maneuvers, because you just don't have enough time to prepare yourself. Now you could set that as an airmanship challenge to get good enough that you could do that yourself without any coaching. But that's the kind of thing we're talking about. Fun, hones your skills. A little bit more reasonable though, and we're definitely planning on doing this one, is you take that laser, put it on the airplane, but you take the laser receiver and put it on the ground. So now you can shoot the receiver on the ground from the airplane. This can be a scenario like it's a search and rescue operation. You have to laze the wreck so the SAR satellites can see it. I mean, we can make up a lot of fun scenarios and grade them because we have all this recording equipment, and have competitions, have rewards for doing all this, and a heck of a lot of fun, and really hone our airmanship skills. This could hone our navigation skills, but it really would hone our stick and rudder skills, because I can envision a hard deck of, let's say, 800 feet AGL on this challenge out over the open country, and that means to have a decent angle on the target, you've got to pretty much be lasing it about a mile out. So 800 above and a mile out, you've got to be pretty precise with your aircraft control, real finesse. So, that would be fun, and it would enhance your airmanship skills. So here's the basic formula you might want to keep in mind to think about what I'm talking about here. Airmanship challenges plus flying fun plus recognition equals continuous airmanship improvement. Pretty simple formula. That's what we're talking about here. Now, one more way to look at what Airmanship 2.0 is to look at what we believe an Airmanship 2.0 airman, what he possesses, what he looks like. An Airmanship 2.0 airman possesses skill, discipline, and proficiency. An Airmanship 2.0 airman have a thorough understanding of themselves, their aircraft, their team, their environment, and the risks they face. An Airmanship 2.0 airman consistently display exceptional situational awareness and use good judgment at all times. Now here's one more way to look at it, and we've created this, what we call the Airmanship 2.0 model. If you've been looking at any of our airmanship briefings, you are probably already familiar with the Kern airmanship model. I mentioned Redefining Airmanship, Tony Kern's book earlier, and in that book he has what he calls the airmanship model, and we've dubbed it the Kern airmanship model. And we use that model, if you will, to create this airmanship model, Airmanship 2.0 model. It's different from the Kern model. The three bedrock principles of the Airmanship 2.0 model are commitment. If you're going to practice Airmanship 2.0, you must be committed to it. This isn't something you can do part-time. You have to be consistent. And to be consistent, you have to have the integrity to be consistent, that personal discipline. You also have to have the integrity to be open, to admit your errors, to share your errors with others, and listen to what others have to say about their errors. This has to be a shared experience. Airmanship 2.0 is a shared experience. Can't be done in isolation. Can you study Airmanship 2.0 and gain a lot from it to make you a safer aviator? You sure can. There's a whole lot there you can take and use. But you'll see, as you learn more about it, that to really practice Airmanship 2.0 and get the most you can out of it, you have to do it as a shared experience in many ways. Now, in the Airmanship 2.0 model, there are 5 pillars of support. The safety culture we talked about, the safety management system we mentioned, the comprehensive airmanship training, modern aircraft, and dedicated airmen as a group. That commitment I was talking about, you individually, but the model to work, we have to all be dedicated to Airmanship 2.0, to spreading the word about Airmanship 2.0, to working the system together for it to work. And the capstone outcomes we can expect if we work this model properly is greatly improved personal flying safety and vastly improved personal flying enjoyment. Now again, I have to reiterate, all of this is just the tip of the iceberg. So again, I'd recommend you go to the Center for Airmanship Excellence website, airmanshipexcellence.org, enter the Airmanship 2.0 subweb, and everything you'd want to know about Airmanship 2.0 we believe is there, or at least it's everything we're thinking about it right now. All right, one more chance here to open up the mics and have questions or comments. So mics are open. Anybody have anything? Okay, I'll close the mics. And we'll move on. So if this has been interesting to you, here are the next steps I would suggest. Go to the airmanshipexcellence.org website, register for airmanship updates. They're free. They'll keep you in the loop on things like this series of webinars, but we do a lot of other things to spread the word about Airmanship 2.0, to experience Airmanship 2.0, to learn about Airmanship 2.0 at the Center for Airmanship Excellence, and that'll keep you in the loop on what we're up to and what's available to you. If you have not yet, I'd suggest you register for the rest of these webinars in this series, and you can do that by going to FAAsafety.gov and just accessing all of the seminars and webinars, because it's looking like this series is filling up about on the day that they are announced on the SPAN system with the emails. So if you want to make sure you have a spot, you might want to do it that way. And if you miss any of the briefings in this series, no problem. This is being recorded, and it takes about a few days before it goes through our system and we get them posted on the airmanshipexcellence.org website. But you can go there into the Airmanship Excellence archives and find recordings of all of the webinars in this series as they're recorded. Also, you can again go under that Airmanship 2.0 subweb and view all of these briefings. And again, I suggest you do this because, Mark, as your question showed, or my answer to your question showed, that we just don't have the time in a short webinar to go into all the detail there is to look at before any reasonable pilot would want to make a decision to switch from Airmanship 1.0 to Airmanship 2.0. However, at the point that you do decide you want to get involved with this, again, it's all free. Apply to participate. There are 3 different ways you can apply to participate right now. But more the merrier. We're looking for people to help us make this a success, because we believe this is the future of a successful personal flying segment of the general aviation industry. And even if you're not convinced about this, even if you think we're all wet, even if you have strongly held contrary opinions, I'd like to ask you personally to start spreading the word about Airmanship 2.0. Ask other people you know who are interested in flying, especially those new people who are thinking about learning to fly that you know. hey, have you heard about this Airmanship 2.0 thing? Have you seen the Wings program announcements on these webinars? And because the more we all talk about this, the better it's going to get, and the more of us, I think, will start operating this way, and the better personal flying will get for all of us. Well, thank you very much for your attention during this webinar. I appreciate you taking the time to join it. If you have any questions or comments that come up after the webinar now, please feel free to contact me. We're always open. All of us volunteers are open to talking about Airmanship 2.0. You know, this isn't all cast in concrete yet, how we're going to implement it for personal flying. We think we have it pretty well figured out. We certainly have it well enough figured out to start it. But you know, it's going to evolve, and part of that is getting input from you. I'm available by phone at this number, 815-349-8530. Email dcook, K-O-C-H, at airmanshipexcellence.org. Or if you forget all that, just go to airmanshipexcellence.org, hit the contact button. So I'll leave you with this thought. I'm looking forward to seeing you at another webinar.